Welcome to the sunrise here on WIN TV, Channel 12, and of course Channel 7, and seen around the world on the World Wide Web. Well, this morning for our show, it's going to be quite a lot to talk about for edition October 30th, 2012. Hurricane Sandy has created history, at least in living human memory. And my first guest in the first hour of the show this morning is one of the hardest working individuals I know. He's a medical doctor, of course, quite well known in the San Fernando fraternity, in addition to his medical practice. But he has certainly given the ODPM greater, newer meaning, indeed. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the ODPM. Dr. Stephen Ramroop is going to be sitting in with me. We're going to talk about disaster management here in Trinidad, as we seem to be experiencing on the planet certain changes with respect to weather patterns and, of course, the behavior, not only of hurricanes, but indeed, are we as a country and as a people prepared for such an eventuality, or any kind of disaster for that matter? Dr. Ramroop is going to be chatting with me till 7 o'clock this morning. And of course, those of you who've got your questions, the doc will be more than happy, I'm sure, to take some of your calls and your questions and, of course, your queries. Coming up in the second hour of the show, there's a martial arts group based in South that actually represented Trinidad and Tobago and won several medals at a world competition. Now, I'm going to be talking to Kiran Singh, who is one of the directors of this group. Kiran Singh, of course, is a businessman in San Fernando, but in addition to that, he's a former president of the Business Association down there. I think he was also chamber president at one time, Doc. And Kiran, of course, is going to be sitting in with me in the second hour of the show, and we're going to get some demonstrations, gentlemen. Any of you know martial arts, kung fu, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, and that sort of thing? Well, we'll look at it from the perspective of how this discipline, because many of these young kids who won medals at this world competition were young people who were involved in what one would normally describe as a delinquent lifestyle, and of course engaged in delinquent behavior. This sport helped to temper much of that, and of course how this and the world of martial arts can not only play a great role in the contribution of youth development, but of course deal with issues of youth delinquency, and indeed take us as a country to the Olympic Games, where it's of course one of the major sports there. So that's our show this morning. As usual, we'll be taking a look at this day in history, stars' birthdays, and what I can tell you today, October 30th, the Jose Massacre took place in 1884. We'll be running some details on that for you during the course of it. And Doc, you remember Fonzie? Yes. Henry Winkler? He was born on this day, the Fonz, considered to be the coolest man around. Well, we'll be running into that story. And also today, October 30th, one of the most important fights in the history of Muhammad Ali's career, the Rumble in the Jungle. That's where he fought George Foreman in Zaire in one of the greatest fights and one of the great turning points. I actually have seen that fight probably 100 times. It's just one of those. In addition to the Thriller in Manila, the Rumble in the Jungle was the other great fight of Muhammad Ali. So these are some of the stories that we'll be looking at. But remember, Dr. Stephen Ramroop is going to be my guest. Now, as I move across to make my coffee, by the way, Doc, I know we omitted to give you coffee this morning, so I'm going to make sure that you have yours in a moment. I'm going to be taking a look at what's happening in the Newsday. Of course, the big story in the Newsday this morning is close to 400,000 Trinidad and Tobago nationals, of course, are in the post-tropical cyclone's path. Very, very disturbing. And indeed, she's now at the stage of a post-tropical cyclone. Sandy has created history. She has gone past latitudes that has never been seen before, that kind of activity on the American eastern seaboard. And it is something that is certainly a phenomenon for the world. In addition to that, it was expected, of course, that government use its majority in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, the CPA Youth Parliament, to approve its motion that called for this country to take all measures to become a full member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. And I'll run the details of that for you just after 7 o'clock this morning, or what we actually mean by that. Another Chinese businessman robbed. Recently, we've seen that many of the Chinese businessmen who came here and are conducting their affairs, particularly in restaurants, we've seen, as a matter of fact, 2 murders, but the robberies continue. Almost every month you see a Chinese restaurant in this country being robbed, and it's a major, major concern. Of course, I've got to address that with the Foreign Affairs Minister, and whether there's any consideration, even by the Chinese Association, to start protecting these individuals. So that's one of the major stories. And of course, if jail for drunk driving, people will change their ways. How much of that is actually true? And I'm sure Dr. Ramrup would have treated certain cases during the course of his medical career. It says here, the only way public perception about drinking alcohol and driving in this country is going to change is if people start going to jail for the offense. Well, I often say that. As a matter of fact, take care of the small crimes, and of course, the big crimes, you'll notice that will be reduced. So, will more jail time for people change their ways? I know one fella who actually, gentlemen, works in the media, who was held for drunk driving down in Manzanilla. He did the jail time, and I'll tell you a very funny story about it. You know, usually, you've got to go to a JP, right? Well, my boy went in to get a JP, and interestingly enough, when he went into the JP, he was caught, I think, just around the curfew time when we had the state of emergency. And curfew time was 6 o'clock. He was stopped in Manzanilla somewhere around 20 minutes after 5. So he just had about 40 minutes. Had to leave Manzanilla, go up to get the JP in Grandy. And Doc, you wouldn't believe this. With such limited time there, trying to avoid going to jail, the JP came out. First, his wife came out and said, well, okay, he's inside. So that was fine. She ran inside to get the JP. When the JP came out, the JP is on a walker, moving like this, slowly outside. Well, needless to say, he did the jail time. So that's a look at some of the major stories this morning on the show. And let's go across to Lawrence Arjun. Is Lawrence downstairs here? Yep, he's there. Let's link up with him. Not yet. He's not downstairs yet. All right. Okay, good. Well, let's take a break, Giles. And, of course, I'll get all set up. And then we can come back with Lawrence Arjun with the news to 6 o'clock. And then, as we say, Dr. Stephen Ramrup on the show this morning. So please stay with us. Quite a lot to discuss. Quite a lot. Disaster management in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back. Thank you, Giles.
Joining us for your morning news update on the Wind Communication Network. I'm Lawrence Arjun. Good morning. Dubbed Superstorm Sandy, the hurricane has swept into the east coast of the United States, bringing flooding, cutting power, and claiming at least 13 lives. Sandy caused a record surge of seawater into New York City, flooding subways and road tunnels and plunging much of lower Manhattan into darkness. 9 states have declared a state of emergency. 50 million persons in the storm's path will be affected. We have more from the BBC.
Manhattan, unlike any other, the city that's supposed to never
sleep, is eerily quiet, awaiting the storm. The subways shut, even Wall Street's not trading. The water's already rising on the southern tip of Manhattan in the evacuation zone.
We're used to coming down here and the water being calm and much, much lower, and now it's way up over the banks already, and the storm hasn't even gotten here. So it makes me nervous.
The impact of Hurricane Sandy is starting to be felt. High winds and crashing waves along the East Coast.
Good morning, America. Breaking news on the Halloween superstorm.
Morning TV shows left Americans in no doubt about the coming storm's severity.
50 million people in its path.
Storm preparations take precedence over campaigning for next week's presidential election. Mitt Romney's cancelled his events for 2 days. Barack Obama's return to the White House.
The center of the storm is going to hit landfall sometime this evening. But because of the nature of this storm, we are certain that this is going to be a slow-moving process through a wide swath of the country, and millions of people are going to be affected.
The Holbrook family in Brooklyn are leaving nothing to chance as they prepare for the storm to do its worst.
If we get a lot of water in the backyard here, it could lap over that sill, so we're going to sandbag that when we're done filling up the water here. We have a ton of food upstairs. Most of it is non-perishable, so if the refrigerator goes out, we can still eat it for days.
Airports up and down the East Coast are closed. Thousands of flights have been cancelled, creating chaos for travellers. This family from Cornwall, making their first visit to New York, now don't know when they'll be able to get home.
It wasn't anywhere on our radar when we left home, and obviously concerned with the delay in flights, will we be delayed going home later in the week. So I think, sort of really quite anxious, really, and would rather have come at a different time.
This is a once-in-a-generation storm with the potential to kill and flatten. Millions of Americans are braced for the full impact.
And the TNT's embassy and consulate in Washington, D.C. and New York have been preparing locals in the path of Hurricane Sandy for the impending disaster. Ambassador Dr. Neil Pearson, who is based in the United States Capitol, told 7 Eyewitness News that conditions in Washington have deteriorated. All public transport has been shut down. He said the embassy has advised staff and locals to stay indoors.
We expect the unexpected with this particular storm. This is a hybrid. It has not happened for 100 years. It is a hurricane from the Caribbean, embracing an Arctic front coming down from the Arctic Circle, coupled with a jet stream, coupled with a full moon moving into a new moon. And we are very much looking forward to the high tide which comes this evening, because one expects the Gravette to be underwater. By all reports, the subways may be inundated with water. And I think for the first time in many years, this country learned from the experience of Katrina in New Orleans.
Consular General in New York, Nan Ramgoolam, said that they have been monitoring the situation since Friday.
Asking them to be safe, follow the instructions and guidelines being given by their local authorities. That's the diaspora members, and I also placed a letter again on the website today asking them to take all instructions and precautionary measures necessary and follow what their local authorities tell them.
And the Caribbean Airlines has been forced to cancel all its flights to and from the JFK International Airport in New York due to Hurricane Sandy. In a statement yesterday, Carl said passengers who were scheduled to travel between October 28th to the 31st can change their reservations without any penalty. Carl said the changes must take place by November 4th and is making it clear that it will not be responsible for arrangements to and from an alternative airport for any hotel or incurred overnight expenses. The airline says those who choose not to use their ticket now can hold it for travel up to 1 year from the original date of issue. And in other news, if there was any fear that the future for Parliament is in jeopardy, then all one would have to do was to look at the 10th sitting of the Youth Parliament, which took place yesterday. All doubts would have disappeared, replaced by pride, the knowledge that our future is in good hands. Darrell Hirilal explains.
Members of the government are being continuously redundant. Same thing over and over. Increased investment, increased transparency, blah, blah, blah. Come on, government, give me more than that.
We will not be a roaring lion, Mr. Speaker, but instead, we will be the lion tamers to tame that roaring lion of corruption, of poverty, and of low standards of living, Mr. Speaker.
Wouldn't the People's Partnership and PNM love to get their hands on some of these young would-be politicians? But judging from their performances today during the 10th sitting of the Youth Parliament, this seems an automatic future. Students from 26 schools participated in today's session, and contributions were reminiscent of debates of old with the likes of Lionel Sukaran, Dr. Eric Williams, and Basdev Pandey. Tobago students also made an equal showing.
Well, the answer is quite simple. This can be done by the implementation of the EITI, which will ultimately foster greater transparency and greater accountability in this country. The question I would like to ask to my opposing colleagues is why should a country rich in natural, non-renewable resources as Trinidad and Tobago have citizens, have young people living within a poverty belt?
But it was not all about the usual politicking we are accustomed to, as debaters delivered well thought out and informed arguments, either for or against the adoption of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative.
My office is saying, let us amend Income Tax Act 7501 because the Constitution already supports the main objectives of the EITI, Mr. Speaker. So let us just amend this act and implement the EITI in Trinidad and Tobago.
Honorable member, we would like to refrain from unparliamentary language and remain within the parameters of the debate and do it in a diplomatic and honorable manner, please. Thank you.
So just maybe, by the next general elections in 2015, we will see some of these faces sitting in the parliament. Darrell Irilal for 7 Eyewitness News.
It's on the Win Communication Network. I'm Lawrence Arjun. Good morning.
Right, welcome back, and thank you very much, Lawrence Arjun, for the news. And of course, the big story, of course, is the weather. Hurricane Sandy certainly making history. With me, as I told you, Chief Executive Officer of the Office of Disaster Management and Preparedness, Dr. Stephen Ramroop, medical practitioner. Welcome, Doc. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks for accepting the invitation. Hurricane Sandy, she has created history, hasn't she?
Yeah. She's what we're calling the epic storm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
First time, because she's crossing and traversing latitudes that has never been seen, I think, in human memory.
Yes.
What's the cause of this? Because clearly there must be something wrong. Is global warming a contributing factor to this? Because we know warmer waters influence hurricane activity.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's in the hurricane season. We anticipated that we will get one of these major Category 3 type activities for this year. The forecasting was pretty good by most of the international meteorological organizations. Really, it's the right mix of elements. You know, the right temperature, the right pressures. It just so happened that this sort of propagated the movement.
Yeah.
It's really the right set of.
Because I realized that in Canada, there was some issue with pressure.
Yes.
Barometric pressure up there,
Yes,
atmospheric pressure, sorry, in the Canadian region that actually influenced this.
Yes.
But, I mean, this is such a rare occurrence, and I know that many people will start to say, well, I think it's because of global warming that we're beginning to see greater activity. Can we expect more of the same in the future?
The answer is yes. Based on the science, most of the activities, sometimes, if you look at the trending, it's actually moving a little bit south. So Trinidad and Tobago, previously we felt that we were out of the hurricane belt.
Yeah.
To a large extent we are. And it has a lot to, I guess, to do with the continent of South America being so close and so far east in the Caribbean. But what we are looking at is sometimes there are these outliers, these storms that tend to track a little lower.
Right.
And with global warming and with the evidence of climate change, or most likely what we call climate variability, there is clearly a change of phenomena. You're seeing more high intensity rainfall, a lot of intense moisture in some of these storms that are coming up. So what you really have is not so much the storm itself where the eye is moving, but the bands and the outlying bands that is in the entire circumference of the storm. In this one, it was amazing. It's just that the right set of chemistry, or the right set of temperature and humidity and especially pressure allowed this movement, to kind of move from south, go up to straight up north and eventually northwest. So it's really the right elements in the pot, so to speak.
George Clooney thought he was in the perfect storm. Now, we saw that Trinidad and Tobago was affected by these feeder bands from much of this activity. And of course, just from the feeder bands alone, we face disastrous circumstances. Of course, I was quite impressed with the ODPM's response. I think Diego Martin was a wake-up call for a lot of Trinidadians that what can happen, because I don't think in our history have we had seen it really this bad.
We had a similar incident, if I remember correctly, in November of the previous year, where Diego Martin was impacted similarly, and we had quite a lot of debris and quite a lot of flooding. In fact, I know, for example, the Maraval River had, exceeded its banks. So we have had similar episodes before. I know in 2010, when the current government came into power, there was floods all over the country.
I think it was day number one
yes, I
on
think
the job.
So, if I remember
they
correctly.
weren't even installed as a government,
Right.
and they had to go out onto the street.
That's correct. So I think that what you're seeing really is phenomena that most of the disaster officers around the world have been trying to tell people that, it's a new kind of storm. It's a new kind of weather. Although you would be accustomed with the dry season and the rainy season in Trinidad, you would understand that some of the phenomena, which is really our normal rainy season, has caused a lot of, anxiety in the population, especially the media as well. And one of the things is that we have to understand is that most of the weather that we saw so far for the rainy season has been reasonably rainy season weather that we have been accustomed to. So on some evenings or some afternoons, you will get the afternoon thunder showers, which is in keeping with what we normally saw in Trinidad and Tobago for many, 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 many years because of our rainy season. But what we're seeing, for example, that occurred in Diego Martin was this cloud of rain with intense a lot of moisture that just stayed there. And it was so fast with the local elements of heat and humidity and pressure and everything else, that you just got a lot of rainfall in a short space of time. Now you're looking at, and you can see that is happening, for example, in Australia. It happened in England, right? It happened in Pakistan, right? So this heavy, high-intensity rainfall, which is unusual for over 100, in some cases over 500 years, where people haven't seen this type of rainfall. We're seeing it now.
Now, I want to ask you this. More rain means more water. But why would communities like Diego Martin be affected the way it's been affected? And this is what I want to point to.
Yeah.
We've seen development in this country, houses being built all over the place. Is this a contributing factor, indiscriminate?
There is a scorecard. It's really a number of reasons. It's not just one. It's a combination of. And unfortunately, it has come to a situation where all of the factors are affecting what is happening. Clearly, most town and country will tell you that if you buy a lot of land, you can only put about 30 to 33% of that as a building, right? What is happening is when we visited Diego Martin and places like La Puerta and whatnot, and we visited the area where the gentleman had passed because of the movement of the hill, what we found is that there were a lot of extensions, right, to the actual original building.
Yeah.
A lot of the buildings were unregulated, meaning that they were not according to any sort of proper building codes. A lot of extensions had a lot of galvanized roofing, right, and there were a lot of concrete that was on the ground. So which means that normally when rain falls, you would feel, now landslides are normal phenomena. In any hill, there will be landslides. That is part of the natural turnover of the soil. That is what occurs. Landslide occurs. Now, if you develop the land and you plant and you rip the land of good vegetation, you will find again there's going to be an increased runoff.
Right.
Because plants need water. Also, if you put a lot of concrete, especially, you would find that there's going to be a lot of runoff as well. Also, you also notice that within the housing that has been developed, a lot of the water, right, is going into septic tanks, but mostly into latrines, right, and outhouses. Now, when you pump a lot of outhouses, right, in the hills with water, and water fills that up during a sort of heavy rainfall, again, that also moves the hill because it creates pockets of weaknesses in the hill. Right. So a lot of what we saw in Diego Martin in the previous November, as well as this, was a lot of sewage coming down in the debris and the water and the material coming down. Then there's the runoff from the house. The storm drains that were built really will cater for the water that comes when there's an increase in water runoff because of the high intensity rainfall for that time. Water doesn't get time to soak into the earth then, so to speak.
Right.
So what it is because of the high intensity rainfall, it runs off. And if you facilitate that runoff by having concrete and are more galvanized in your land, clearly you'll have more water runoff.
Right.
Now when that runoff is running into drains that are built 10, 20 years ago and not catering for the new development, means you have more water coming in. And then a lot of the house water, in a lot of communities all over the world, if you develop them properly, a lot of your water from your house, as like your showers and whatnot, they go into a separate channel. and go into sewers and underground sewers. So
Just
that doesn't happen here.
Just coming back to the point on, you noticed that they were extended parts of the structure, and we're seeing some imagery here of the type of flooding that we've seen in Trinidad. These are the fact that it's extended families, that there are more people living on one lot of land.
Yes.
So they've got people living above, on the side, and perched over, and that kind. And you also spoke of the fact that it's a lot of galvanized, which means that it's shoddy structures. It's,
Yes.
you know,
Yes. It's not built according to good codes, and that is one of our problems because...
Why is this happening, Doc? And this is my question. Why is this going unchecked?
Yes.
Why is our community... Diego Martin was once an affluent community, and then we saw people pouring in from all over.
It's a trend. It's not just happening in Trinidad. In fact, the most high-risk population all over the world now, statistically, is the urban population. And that is a fact, and that is where we are focusing. Before disaster offices, a lot of response agencies, a lot of governments focused on rural communities as building resilience in these communities because of their risk. But the evidence is showing that throughout Latin America, throughout Europe, and a lot of the other countries, in fact, most of the populations live in cities right now, and especially in the urban areas like Laventille and Belmont and all of these areas. So what we are seeing is, one, is a trend. Two, because of the normal push and pull factors, which is in the common business, in the business districts of your cities, you will have people coming in there for employment, you know, for recreation, for transport and other issues, selling their goods and whatnot. So again, there's a population increase, and you have to house them. A lot of the housing, though, is unregulated, meaning that there are two factors. One, government regulation and enforcement being the most important, and two, the population itself expanding in keeping with the requirements of population to improve their economic and socioeconomic status. So urban populations are really increasing, and that is why even the IDB is working currently with our government in having what is called an urban program, which is safer cities, building safer cities.
Clearly from the situation,
That's
Doc,
correct.
is that the horse has already bolted. I mean,
It's bolted. It's bolted, and one of the major efforts right now of disaster organizations throughout the world is to understand the urban risks. We talked about disaster management. It's really disaster risk management. We now understand that if we go to have a major earthquake in Trinidad, it's the urban populations that are going to be affected. Not just so much in the fact that, you know, we know that it's going to be affected because of what we just talked about with the flooding in Diego Martin.
A la Port-au-Prince in Haiti.
That's correct.
That
And it's
was
the
most
urban
area
population.
of
And that is the evidence that is coming out. So which means that a lot of focus has to be built, has to be put towards the development of our urban communities. And regulation of housing, regulation of building codes should now, for all new buildings, we are advising government and government agencies that no new building should go up in any one of the high-risk communities in this country. And we're talking about a lot of other communities in Trinidad and Tobago.
How are they going to check that?
I think that one of the more robust systems that we have had in our country is the decentralization of authority. For example, the central government and the local government. One of the ways that we have to do that is obviously to beef up the resources of the local government authorities. Anybody who builds a house has to go through the local government authority, and they must approve the building. Now, that is, as you know, if you build a house in Trinidad, for most of us who build, we have to go through the very rigid and robust system of going to town and country, getting the plans to the corporation, getting it back to health for drainage issues and public health, getting it approved by the council, and the building inspector gives you a completion certificate. Right. And that's a fact. However, the problem now is that the local authorities may not have been able to enforce or regulate new buildings. Because if I, for example, put up a building and it's encroaching 5 to 6 feet in front of the road, I have about 25 letters of the community if it's me. But if it's someone else, you don't see it. So which means that what is working for me is not working for someone else.
This is interesting that you're saying all of this, Doc, because I drove through San Juan the other day and El Socorro, and I actually see that there are businesses who are built straight up onto the pavement.
Yes.
And in the event of a disaster, and it's a narrow road, in the event of a disaster, it's unimaginable what would happen, particularly in the case of an earthquake. Yeah. But you realize that government policy, well, not necessarily government's internal policy, where the party policy ultimately influences government, would have allowed communities like Laventille to spring the way they've sprung. Communities like Diego Martin, because for the sake of packing people within a constituency, ultimately led to that. Because, and the reason why I'm saying it, is because they were aware that there were people coming in and starting to live and extended families occupying certain areas. And these people were allowed to be registered to vote. So they were well cognizant of 10 and 15 and 20 people. I know in one household they had something like close to about 40 people living on one household. Government policy in the past has got to shoulder some blame where this is concerned. Do you agree with that?
No, well, the thing about it is that, I mean, I am representing a government office, and I would not be able to comment on such a comment, with respect to one of the cause. I mean, if you look at it, if you look at policy...
Has it contributed?
Yes, as a contributing factor. I mean, clearly it's a factor that, could be considered, but in my opinion, I think a lot more has to be, and I think this is what the focus is in most of the governments, most of the training that we have had in terms of disaster risk management, is that we need to focus on the communities themselves. And clearly, all the elements, and one of them may be one of those that you mentioned, in which government policy needs to be addressed in terms of regulating housing for whatever reason, right? Clearly, that's a reason.
Yeah.
The enforcement of such policy is another reason.
Yeah.
So even if you find that a government may have a policy for whatever party requirement that they may have to have votes. Let's use that, for example, as a suggestion.
Voter party.
There is a government office, which is really it has nothing to do with party politics. There is a ministry of local government. There is a ministry.
This is the law.
That's correct. And there's a permanent secretary, and there are officers of government that are supposed to ensure that the law is enforced and regulated. So I think that we must be very clear that whatever government is in power, public policy, physical development plans, whatever government is in power spends millions of dollars to send technocrats to a lot of conferences and workshops all over the world to bring back into this country best practices.
Are we doing that now, Doc?
Yes, of course.
Are you satisfied that government is enforcing
I am happy to say that, I mean, at least when I was in all the governments so far, right, I did serve under a previous government at the Airports Authority, and I was given the opportunity again to travel to bring home a lot of the lessons that were found in regional airports throughout the world. I visited Ecuador, I visited Holland, and I brought back into the country a lot of what we learned in terms of airports. In this government as well, I have traveled all over the world in terms of Singapore, we went to Samoa, and we have brought back a lot of practices which I have implemented, which I have shared with my team, and which I have espoused with most of my colleagues in the National Security Ministry. So I am suggesting, therefore, that a lot of that is being done in other ministries. Because when I go to some of the conferences, I see people in the airport going to public administration conferences, planning and development conferences and workshops. So therefore, there's a lot of material. And listen to what I'm saying. They're not government ministers. They are technical and technocrats from the ministries. That has nothing to do with party politics.
That's right, and just simply getting
And therefore, my point is clear that it is very important that if people go and bring back, and it's not rocket science. You go to Holland, they show you how to do drainage, right? Anybody could come back from Holland or any one of the countries that are below sea level and tell you, if you go in any one of the roads from Diego Martin to the shore, and under the road you create a massive drainage system where all water comes in, and then you cover back the road almost like a bridge, you're going to solve a lot of the drainage. And you have to do that because if you face it, one, you can't move people from their legal homes because they have a title now.
Right.
Either by length of time that they stay there or by a deed.
Yeah.
Then secondly, you have to stop what is happening right there in terms of new building, and that could be done. And the government has done that. They have stopped and they have regulated all buildings above the 300 meters limit. It's 300 feet or 300 meters.
Yeah.
Okay? And then what we have done now is that the town and country, the cabinet has appointed a building codes committee to present to government. Right?
But didn't we have building codes before?
We had building codes. No, and here is the point. There is no rocket science in building codes.
Right.
You can build houses that are disaster resilient in terms of hurricanes and earthquakes. You have to look at your risks, right? We have sort of improved to that because we are now under a whole new ideology of risk management. And therefore, that is probably the best thing to do because houses, for example, which are very close to Point Lisas, have a different risk to houses that are in Mayaro, close to the oil companies. So in other words, then there are different risks that we're exposed to. All right, and therefore you store items in your warehouse that are different because you have different populations. Now that is really management of risks. So in the same sense, if you're building houses, there is a big fault line that runs from Point Lisas go right up to the swamp in Manzanilla. Which means that if you understand that if there's going to be an earthquake tonight, right, that is the fault that will probably be most active. Of course. Yeah. And that is the fault that's going to rip the country apart and probably separate the north part of the country to the south part of the country. This is a very severe earthquake. Right? Right now, if there's a problem with rain, it separates the north and the south of the highway. Yes. Right now, if an oil tanker capsizes on one side of the highway, it separates the north from the south of the island. So in other words, and clearly from the evidence that we are looking at movement of people from north to the south, if you have an earthquake, for example, at about 7:30 to 9 in the morning, from Claxton Bay to Port of Spain, there are 3 lanes of traffic on the highway going up to Port of Spain.
The death toll could be quite high.
It's going to be high. You know, and therefore we at the ODPM have been suggesting that you have a problem. You cannot solve it right away, but you can use solutions. For example, we talked about carpooling. A father has a car, a mother has a car, and a son has a car. We have to look at carpooling. We talked about something we use for ICC World Cup cricket. Vehicles that were coming from Deep South Park to the Mani Ramjan Stadium. Vehicles that were coming from Central Park to the Atto Boulder Stadium. Yes. Vehicles that were coming from the East Park to the Larry Gomes Stadium. Now, I'm not saying that you have to park cars on a daily basis at the stadium, but there's a lot of state lands that could be actually plowed, where that could actually be cleaned, right, paved, and used as even collection centers. And if you build them closer to about 30 feet, 40 feet high, they could be tsunami centers. Yes. And I have recommended already to this government that what we need to do along the highway is what they've been doing in Ecuador.
Now, how at risk are we for an earthquake in this country?
We are extremely high. We are overdue for an earthquake. Yesterday morning, we had a little drill. We do have some random drills at ODPM where we try to see how ready are we for earthquakes as the ODPM. And we always do these simulations. And this month, we are launching a program called Are We Ready? You will see it in most of the, we're going to be blitzing it very soon. And the answer is that the ODPM might be ready. The fire services might be ready. The police might be ready. In our estimation of ready, we are yellow as a country in terms of a red, yellow, green. Green being the best readiness, yellow being somewhere in the middle, and red means we're not at all. So in this country, based on our qualitative and quantitative metrics, right, we are about a yellow in terms of our readiness. However, and this is the problem, a large amount of responsibility or a large element of readiness lies with the actual homeowner, the person who lives in a home. Yeah. Because the science of disaster shows that in all the major earthquakes, even in Christchurch in New Zealand, it took about 2 days to 3 days. In developed countries, it might be a little less, but in the first 24 to 48 hours, you're left alone. You're left alone with a nasty silence. Just after the earthquake, you're going to hear your car alarm go off for a while. After that is sorted out, there's going to be an eerie, fearful silence where nothing is, not even the radio, not even the television is going to come on. And that is going to be very scary because you're going to be left alone and you wouldn't know if anybody's coming to help you. And that is where we are suggesting and we are developing what we call community emergency response teams. These are teams within the communities that begin to mobilize people a little bit so that when they come out shaky from their homes, they begin to organize themselves and move them to what we call collection points or evacuation points. And at that point in time, the communities will obviously have to see about themselves. And
but this is going to take a massive public education exercise.
It is going to do that. We have started, not today, we have started about, maybe when I started in ODPM around April of 2010. We began in June of that year. We began what we call CORE, Communities Organized and Ready for Emergencies.
Right.
So we began to sensitize the communities about the need. Now, the problem we're having is that the local government ministry under the Municipal Act has the major responsibility for the burgesses. So
is that good or bad?
That is good and bad. The ODPM really has a challenge in that not just working on the communities, we also have to ensure that government understands. And I kept coming back to Diego Martin, that was the problem. We at the ODPM realized that the Diego Martin Corporation was a bit slow in getting off the ground. And therefore, we had to take a responsibility of bringing in, for example, heavy equipment, bringing in, for example, the 1st Engineer Battalion, because when we looked at the overall picture that was going on, unless we had a state activity, right, that would have been taking control, so to speak, until Diego Martin Corporation's resources came up to speed, people would have lost more lives. They would have lost more lives in Diego Martin.
Yeah.
Right? And the Honorable Minister of National Security took the responsibility because by law, he is the one who authorizes the engagement of the ODPM through national security. But unfortunately or fortunately, it is the Minister of Local Government who has the responsibility to engage the local corporations so that they are ready for the disasters.
It's interesting you would say that. The evidence is there of the intervention by the government. I
Yes.
mean, you all handle that brilliantly, and no one can fault you for that. Everyone has spoken about that, including even those who are opposed to the administration. But you made a very key point. The people of Diego Martin weren't prepared for this. They certainly weren't in a very good position at the time when help,
Yes.
while they waited for help to come.
I would like to say that they were better off because they had the experience of November. Now, herein lies the catch-22.
Yeah.
When we looked at the number of calls, what we had, luckily, we had gotten the government, the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, and the ministers to agree on the 511 call center. About a year ago, we had tried to initiate the call center, but it was not approved because what had happened is that we were looking at the overall 911 system. Now, because of the Diego Martin incident, we had already set up the 511, not perfectly because it was not approved by the cabinet. So what happened is that we had to wait now to get the 911 going. But when the Diego Martin issue occurred, we reinstituted the 511 system. So we got a better understanding of all the calls that were coming in. We asked the population to call 511, and that is what happened. So you see, if fire is getting calls, and police is getting calls, and TNTech is getting calls, and WASA is getting calls, and every agency is getting calls, but no coordination of the calls, then people will drop. A person who is really, really at risk you'll not hear them because they would have called someone and we didn't know and we can't
So the
follow.
calls will ultimately help you to identify where the greatest risks are, where the greatest number of people have been affected.
And that is the beauty about it. Now, when we looked at the calls that were coming in, there's a number of residents who took care of their own. They came out, they got their power washers because of the last thing. Some of them went and bought sandbags even from before. So in other words, in the August impact, a lot of the higher socioeconomic groups in the community sorted themselves out.
Yeah.
The only problem some of them had was when the access was inhibited, and that was the need for heavy equipment.
Yes.
So that what was happening there, luckily what had happened at the ODPM, when we looked at what was happening in Japan and the movement of debris and what was happening in Christchurch after, and in Chile, one of the biggest need after disaster, people forget, is the debris management.
Yes.
That is moving the junk, moving the silt.
And it was
getting out.
extensive in Diego Martin.
And what we had to do actually is we had already, in fact, the ODPM has already was working with almost 18 heavy equipment contractors. What we did is we said we can't wait until the local government authorities, because they have to go through a process and they have to look at certain costs and they have to look at 8 to 4 kind of activities, where we now have people with already have excavators and backhoes and trucks already doing work in all the communities. So it's easier to mobilize. So what we did is we went and we got about 18 of them to come to ODPM. We sat with them and we said, in the event we have a problem in Cedras or Icacas or Mayaro, we'll call you.
Yep.
Right? And they agreed. And luckily, it happened about 2 weeks before. And when the Honorable Minister said, Dr. Ramrock, we need people here, time is of the essence, right? Because people are going to die. He said, go ahead and call these guys. And we called 3 people and they were there within 2 hours. We got the police to escort the heavy equipment, and they were the ones who actually were cleaning up the area before everybody came.
And I saw CPEP intervened as well.
That's correct.
And now, have we been able to identify the various areas? Say, for instance, a storm, a hurricane were to hit Trinidad. We're seeing more frequency. As a matter of fact, just last night I was looking that something is forming just off the coast of Africa.
That's correct.
In the Atlantic right now, and she looks quite big.
Yes.
Filled with a lot of moisture.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're going to be looking at that. Where are the areas that will be that will be most affected should we get a hurricane?
Right.
Like
now, that is why the answer to that is we know them, and we know them.
Yeah.
And the beauty about it, you see what happened there. They evacuated over 5 to 10 million people from high-risk areas.
Yes.
So FEMA and the National Guard, they know exactly where they were going to have people impacted. They knew where all the differently abled were. They know where all the street dwellers were. They knew where most of the patients are persons who are high risk, for example, and they moved them out. Now, how did they know that? One is that they have a very good, more developed social structures. Most of the street dwellers, they encourage these kitchens, right? So people will go and register. Yeah. Good? Then the police always pass, and the police there can tell you where you have pockets of people living out of that, right? Then you have everybody registers their disabled school or their deaf or their home for the deaf and whatnot. So in a country that actually can evacuate people, your social fabric, your social systems have to be evolved.
And knowledge of it.
Not just bring hampers when something happens, not just bring a mattress when something happens, but have social systems there so you can know where the pregnant woman is on the street. So that the visitor from the government as institution or the health center, when they are assigned streets, and there is the census, the housing census from 2000. There's a new housing census supposed to be taken. They can tell you, and it is used for the local government elections. They can tell you in which electorate you are, how many streets there are, how many females, how many males, how many businesses, how many dwellings. And every councillor and every disaster unit of the corporation should have designated to them, divided up to say, well, I have 10 streets and I know I have 1,000 people.
From your findings, is
That's
that
correct.
the case?
And well, it's not the case.
It's not the case.
That is not the case. And that is where we have a lot of capacity issues. So what we have to do, we have to work on what we call the science. We have to say, listen, at the last heavy winds, for example, in Gasparillo and in Cedros, 20 homes, roofs were blown off. Right? So therefore, if I'm going to get a Sandy, I'm going to tell my army, I'm going to tell the local government, we need to move all of these people. Right? Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, we do not have authorities. ODPM has no authority. The only time we can have authority, if the president declares a disaster, if he declares a disaster, the president, through the prime minister and the minister of national security, can authorize an agency, which will obviously be us, to then take authority. So we have no authority. We're just a cabinet-appointed committee. We are currently working on that right
Doc,
now.
I think, in my own personal opinion, I think that's absurd, but that's my own personal opinion.
Right now, the only act that we have is called the Disaster Measures Act. And only if the Prime Minister advises the President to declare a state of emergency. At that point in time, as you can see, there was a curfew, there was a state of emergency declared by President Obama.
But why not give your authority the teeth to monitor the situation and say, listen?
We have not reached that stage. ODPM,
but should you?
Yes. I was in Singapore 2 weeks ago, and in most countries, there's a Ministry of Civil Defense. Right? In other words, there's a civil defense authority in most countries. And that is what's happening in the United States. FEMA is that authority. Right? In Trinidad and Tobago, ODPM is supposed to be that authority, but we are not. We're just a cabinet-appointed committee. Right, sorry, it's a cabinet-appointed agency.
Yeah.
So, in other words, and when we talked about moving people, I would have to authorize, but I cannot mandate evacuation. Now, in most of what you were seeing there, the National Guard could perform what is called mandatory evacuations in some areas. But you still saw a gentleman got killed because he was under a tree that fell on him. Which means that even if you have mandatory evacuations, there's some people who chose to stay.
Chose to stay in their shop. Some I saw, and a truck was coming through.
It's not a bad thing, because if you map them and you know that there are 100 people in a village, and I said, okay, Defense Force, get your buses, get the local government buses, get the school buses, and move these people. You need to go in first, months before, and tell them what they need to pack, and we're doing that. So they're supposed to do that because we have gone to these communities already, the ODPM, with the councillors, with the disaster units. So we're already working on them as one.
Where are the high-risk communities?
Oh, we have quite a lot. Think about all the media. Think about all the complaints that we have had. Houses blown off in Gasparillo, Claxon Bay. Remember them. Think about Cedros. Houses blown off in Cedros. Houses blown off in Laventil. There was a sporting complex in Tunapuna that was blown off. So when Laventil, for example, all the urban communities, if I have Sandy coming, every one of those persons will have to be evacuated. Diego Martin, because when that is coming, what you're seeing there in the United States is going to happen in Diego Martin. Because it happened in November, it happened in August, which means that we are going to tell the state, La Puerta, La Saiva, they're going to have to move.
Yeah.
So in other words, and if you look at what I'm saying, we have evidence to show who has to go, right?
But, you know, what you're saying here, Doc, is that we can prepare for a hurricane.
Not an earthquake.
That's what I want to come
and
to.
That is what I told you.
And you're saying that we're overdue for an earthquake.
That's correct. So that is what I told you a few days ago at another venue. I said an earthquake is a different kettle of fish, right? What you saw in Diego Martin was like a mini earthquake. It means that the rain fell so suddenly, we didn't predict it. We didn't see it in our radar, right? In fact, we didn't. Our systems at Met Office picked it up, but late. And then they said, oh my God, this thing is happening. The cloud just hovered there. And it just poured rain. And the hills just came down. So it was like a mini earthquake. It tested our metal. Now, based on that and the ability for ODPM to see what was happening and move in on the advice of the minister, of course, with the authority of the minister, we performed well. We performed better than we would have in May of 2010 and better than we would have in November of 2011. Right? So which means that therefore there was an improvement in the manner in which the country itself came to its, the relief of Diego Martin. we as a country are yellow when it comes to overall readiness. When it comes to an earthquake, right, we are about red. And the reason why we are red is that the agencies themselves, right, we are currently working with government agencies to develop what we call business continuity planning. So, for example, if you saw what happened in Diego Martin, the river came down and it removed all the communication that was crossing the river to TSTT. There was no B-mobile communication in Diego Martin for the first 2 or 3 days. It was only Digicel. Now, you think about an earthquake striking Trinidad and affecting a lot of these communication equipment throughout the country. Yesterday, when I met with my team, I asked them, and I gave them the same scenario. I said at 9:32 a.m., you just had a very severe shake. It threw you down on the ground, which means the science tells you that that is a big one. What is the next thing you have to do? And we went through that. And I asked him, I said, do you think, so one of my team members, well, the media will call us. And I had a little silence, and I said, let me tell you something. The media will be grappling to get together. There'll be no internet. If you're using any of the local servers, there'll be no phones. All you will be hearing is the alarms of cars. That's all you'll be hearing, because electricity is going to go and no phones, which means that we have to rely on radio. So I asked her, which one of the media houses have satellite internet? Who has BGAN, meaning that who has satellite communication? And I asked her, I said, you are in the communication department. I said, yes. Which one of the media houses, for example, have satellite phones that we can call them and tell them what seismic is saying? And how can we get a message to the people? I said, yes, we have HAM, right? I said, good. So how does
what were your findings?
How does ODPM get up? He said, well, it depends on the people who has to come now and communicate back to the agencies. We call them ESF. I said, how do we get to the ESF who is living in Cedras? And they said, well, we go to the police station. I said, good. Could you call now and tell me which police station has a satellite phone or a radio that we could contact?
None.
So you see, the point about it is that we have to build government readiness, right? And a lot of that has to do with business continuity planning. What happens to TSTT when all the fibers are cut, right? Do we have satellite internet? Can we get a message on a cell phone to someone? In fact, just now we're sending out an expression of interest for a new system called WEA, W-E-A. It's a methodology that is going to use a message that comes on all cell phones, irrespective of whether you have anything at all on the cell phone. It just overrides the cell phone and say, please, if you're living in the Diego Martin area, we want you to meet at the La Saiva Government School because we want to move you out and take you out of the area.
Right. Yeah, because at that time, the state of confusion, people are looking for a voice or something there to know.
And we are using a system where we're going to be blocking SMS right now from the public and just sending it out to the emergency providers so that it doesn't flood the SMS system. And also, we're going to be using a system where you only get an SMS in the area impacted, and not because you live in that area and you're in Singapore at the time, you're going to get a message.
Well, that certainly is going to help to mitigate human panic.
Yes.
And I think panic is also one of the most critical areas to manage.
If you look at the USA and what is happening, there is almost all the major networks. I mean, people, if you look at some of the people who are out there, they, besides the emergency services, they are in the streets, in the flood with their boots, and they're giving you a picture 24/7. Now, that is good. It's good because the population can put on the internet, they can put on their mobile phones and get CNN downloads or ABC downloads, and they can actually see what is going on. That is an amazing, you see, the power of the media is amazing. I mean, today, for example, I know that there's a media disaster management course at the Express. I only saw it on the Express yesterday. We are the National Disaster Office, and we were not informed by letter or anything else. So we don't even know that if people are coming into our country to talk about disaster, if they understand that they have to be aligned to our national policies. Yeah. So we're a bit upset that we were not invited to the Express House today as part of that.
I'm happy you raised that. Now, I want to ask you this in order to continue to paint a dramatic picture. And of course, we're media as well. So, you know, obviously we want to pursue the dramatic scenario.
It helps.
You're saying that we're at risk with an earthquake, we're in red. What makes us so great?
Red meaning bad, eh?
But what makes us so susceptible to an earthquake? Are we sitting on something that places us at great risk?
Yes, we are. The history shows that over 100 years ago, we had a massive earthquake that demolished the whole of St. Joseph. And all the areas from the Hyatt Hotel go right down to Movie Town. Eyewitness reports show that those areas are liquefiable, meaning that if you remember looking at the little soil that happened in Christchurch on the TV, the soil became like liquid. Well, I'm saying, although our parliament meets there, the UE Seismic doesn't want to have any meetings there because they're telling you, if you have a massive earthquake like 7.7, that occurred off the coast of Canada not too recently,
Yeah.
that whole area is going to sink. So if I have government and parliament at the ODPM now, I have to worry because I have to call in the help of the battalion, the army, to evacuate all my government ministers and all my opposition leaders, right, from the Hyatt, for example, if it occurs any day they have parliament going on there. So in other words, these are some of the risks.
These are reclaimed areas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is liquefiable. In other words, then the soil underneath is going to just sink, although you're piled. So we know those high-risk areas. Now, the thing is, you can't go and tell Parliament don't meet there because, you might get an earthquake in the next 100 years. Yeah. We can't do that. The point about it is that you have to know your risk. So what makes us red is the understanding of every single person who sits at the Hyatt, every single person who sits in those buildings, that we are at risk for earthquake like Japan, perform drills, drill the parliament at least once every 3 months, like they did in Japan. In other words, there's schools in Japan that had drills every month for different contingencies.
Yeah.
Right? So which means that we have to get to that level to get to green.
But I'm deeply concerned about something. Recently, the Jiangsu company came under scrutiny for some shoddy work on a building. In Tokyo, the buildings are earthquake resistant. As a matter of fact, these buildings could be swinging at a certain degree from side to side, and they're going to stay up there. I was in Tokyo, and of course, it was one of the things. In fact, I experienced an earthquake in Tokyo. Our buildings, particularly on the waterfront, which you say is a liquefiable area, are any of these buildings earthquake-proof? Can they stand up?
If it were in a non-liquefiable area, right, the buildings would be built to specs as far as we understand.
Yeah.
Not being an authority, right, we cannot demand that we get the plans nor the developmental plans for those buildings because they are supposed to reside at least with the local government or the city under the laws of the Municipal Act. All buildings in a municipality, the plans should reside, a copy should reside by town and country as well as that. We cannot mandate that. We cannot say, I want that at this point. We can beg them. So really and truly, ODPM doesn't have an answer to that. The people who would have an answer to that is obviously town and country and the city of Port of Spain because they are supposed to hold the plans. Of course, as you know, in the past or even sometimes, a lot of government buildings don't even go through the system sometimes, allegedly.
Yeah.
So which means that you may not have an understand. But we know, based on the history of earthquakes in Trinidad and Tobago, that those are high-risk areas. So even though there is built according to earthquake, they are going to sink.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wouldn't sink right away. So which means that it means, therefore, that you have an unsafe hospital in Port of Spain, right? You might have a lot of high-risk areas. In fact, in certain earthquakes, no matter how resilient you are as a building, you're going to collapse.
Yeah.
Good? And one of the most important things you have to understand is what makes you yellow and red is not the building. What makes you green, is not the building. It's the systems that you have in place. The drilling, the understanding of the people, the public education, that every single householder has to have his disaster bag packed with a torchlight, a whistle, right, and his first aid kit. And if they have children, they have to have hampers like Pampers and whatnot for their children. Now, these things have to be there. The documents have to be in a plastic bag.
Do you have any brochures or anything
we
that's
have
available at
millions
the
of
moment
brochures.
so that we can also make it a part of the public education
We have
exercise?
millions of brochures.
How much time have we got, Giles? It's time for us to go across. Can you spend just about 5 minutes more with me? I want to ask you about sea levels and the rising sea levels that we're witnessing around the world just after 7 o'clock.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Doc. With me, and a very sobering interview this morning with Dr. Stephen Ramroop. We're going to take the news to 7 o'clock with Lawrence Arjun. Doc is going to spend about 5 more minutes with me as we do this. And of course, I'll entertain about 2 or 3 calls. And then also coming up, Kiran Singh and this very special group of young people as we look at youth delinquency. Please stay tuned as we look at disaster in TNT. Stay with us.
Thank you for joining us for your morning news updates on the Wind Communication Network. I'm Lawrence Arjun. Good morning. The massive Hurricane Sandy has claimed 16 lives in the United States overnight. With wind speeds exceeding 80 miles per hour, Sandy swept through the eastern coast, wreaking havoc throughout several states. Now, over 6 million people are without electricity, and several subway tunnels in Manhattan are flooded. The outdoors remain unsafe with debris from fallen trees and destroyed buildings. The BBC tells us more.
The city that never sleeps plunged into darkness. A perfect storm of strong winds, high tides and a surge of seawater has paralyzed lower Manhattan. Overnight, water poured into tunnels and underground car parks. This picture shows the flooding of a subway station through the lift shaft. No one here has seen anything like this before.
What's going on? I don't know what's going on. It's a hurricane. What the hell is this?
And water isn't the only danger. A power station exploded on the east side of the city. Elsewhere, fires broke out in terrifying scenes as emergency services struggled to cope. This is Breezy Point in the borough of Queens, where the fire department said 50 homes were destroyed.
It started in one building, and because of the headwind, it was blowing across. So far, it's involved about 5 buildings. 3 of them collapsed. There were numerous trapped civilians down there. Water going up the block. We couldn't get any apparatus down the block due to chest-high water.
Millions of residents were told to stay at home, fill their baths with water and stock up on candles and food.
Don't call 911 unless it's a real life-threatening emergency. And number 2, don't go out and don't drive. You're just blocking the emergency vehicles from getting where they want to go.
The coast of New Jersey was the first part of the eastern seaboard to feel the full force of the hurricane. It brought not just high winds, rain and floods, but heavy snow.
By 7:15, high tide was getting ever closer, and that meant large sections of Atlantic Avenue here in the heart of Atlantic City were starting to become submerged underwater.
It's still pitch dark and too early to know the full extent of the damage. Further up the east coast, this was a street on the Atlantic coast of Connecticut. Falling trees have added to the dangers. Many have taken refuge in emergency shelters.
The Red Cross is operating over 100 shelters all along the East Coast. So our main priority right now is making sure that our shelter residents have a safe place, a hot meal, and a cot to sleep on.
Millions are now without power, and no one can predict when the lights will come back on. Wall Street is to be closed for a second day. The cost to the economy is already estimated to be in the tens of billions of dollars.
And in other news, within 18 months, those living along the east-west corridor will get a more reliable supply of water. This as WASA gets set to begin a multi-million-dollar project to replace one of the country's oldest water mains. WASA says it will be replacing the pipeline at the Hollis Trunk Main North, and the project is expected to cost $201 million. The pipeline, which runs from Hollis Reservoir, Valencia, to the Eastern Main Road in Laventille, was installed back in 1938. WASA says it will be done in 6 phases, which in the end will reduce leakage and loss of water and increase pressures to boost the stations. The first phase of the project, in which the southern part of the main was replaced, cost $21 million. And the CPEP chairman, Adish Deonarayan, says he is confident that his board will get positive feedback from the review underway on all state boards. The state board's review was supposed to have been done months ago by the Prime Minister. It's now 2 years since most of the state boards were appointed. Deonarayan told 7 Eyewitness News that his board has the right mix of members. While some state companies have come under the limelight for conflict at the board level, the CPEP chairman says issues are always trashed out before board meetings.
We are on smooth sailing. We are quite confident as a company. The company is on a strong footing. As you can see, because of the demand of CPEP, people want more and more of CPEP, but the finances are the way it is. Each person has a right to vote and an opinion. So all being considered, then we all decide on one and we all support it. We never have a situation where 4 and the 5 against. It's 9 members I have.
Of how the board operates.
Well, there is something called power, and not everybody may be cut out to be in a leadership position. And they say leaders are born, they are not made. Some of them could be made based on their following. I don't think it's necessary politics too heavily involved. I think it's the individual themselves. It's about their characteristic, their leadership qualities, and their communication capabilities.
CPEP's line minister, Dr. Rudal Munilal, has mandated the state enterprise to increase its annual revenue from $5 to $20 million. Deonarayan says this is a challenge, but his board can accomplish this, and it's a realistic figure.
We have to develop our proposal package to other companies, and we have to market ourselves, give them a good proposal, and there are many avenues we could go into. We do sanitation, we do landscaping, and we do the environmental enhancement and protection. So, and we also do the marine. I've had discussions with companies about cleaning up their water courses. That is a revenue earner. We're in discussion with WASA to see about their plant operations, TN Tech, their plant operations. Energy wants us to train the workers to clean up oil spills. So in a disaster response, if it's an oil spill, we are able to assist. And all these are revenue earners.
The full interview with the CPEP chairman will be aired tonight at 8 p.m. on Win TV's Markets to Market with Judy Kanhai. And Tobago gets ready for Tobago Tourism Month. This as the Division of Tourism and Transportation of the THA, along with the Caribbean Tourism Organization and other countries in the region, prepare to launch this year's theme, One Sea, One Voice, One Caribbean. The month-long observation is geared towards recognizing the significance of the tourism industry to Tobago. It seeks to educate the public on the importance of developing the sector and recognize the many tourism practitioners who contribute to the growth of the industry. And that brings us to the end of the morning news update on the Win Communication Network. I'm Lawrence Arjun. Good morning.
I'm going to squeeze in, welcome back. I'm going to squeeze in just a couple of calls, one or two calls, because Kiran Singh and, of course, the group are standing by. Doc has also got to take off for his work. 665-6278, 665-6278. Nige, if you can give me some indication of when the calls are coming in. Doc, how at risk are we with respect to rising sea levels in Trinidad? I'm hearing from even my casual conversation with tribologists that water levels are rising and that there's an encroachment even in freshwater areas of salt water. How much of that is true?
That's quite true. If you go down to Icacos now, I mean, if you have been to Icacos 10 years or even 5 years ago, it's not the same shoreline. So what we see on the Trinidad and Tobago map as the tip of Cedros and Icacos is not the same. It has been eroded. So right now, I think there's about 4 coconut trees inside right now, and it's moving in. So if you take your cameras to Cedros or Icacos, and you get access to the plantations there, the guys will show you how the stumps have moved in at a very rapid rate. The science is showing that the rate of increase of coastal erosion and sea level rise is even higher than the anticipated rise, right? And that is the significant problem. It's an acceleration of the rate of coastal erosion.
What are we doing now? Are we building levees? What are we doing? I'm seeing baskets along the Manzanilla coast.
Now, the line ministry, right, is not the ODPM. But what we have done is that we have included climate change adaptation and climate change variability and advocacy in our strategic plan. We hope that with the authority given or vested in the ODPM very soon, we are looking at a cabinet note which gives us the approval to enter into the ODPM as becoming an authority in terms of overall coordination of all disaster risk reduction type activities, including climate change. We'll be able to pull the ministries and say, well, look, tell us what you're doing. Let's just work with you and see if we can get it done in the right way.
So, all right, let me just squeeze in one or two. 665-6278. Dr. Stephen Ramroop, 665-6278. And we'll squeeze in just one or two before we engage this. You mentioned Cedros. Where are some of the other areas? Because I noticed Manzanilla is also
Cedros,
at risk.
Icacos, Manzanilla, Mayaro. There's been a project that we're doing with CDEMA, which is the Regional Caribbean Emergency Disaster Management Agency. We are looking at climate, the coastal decline and the sea level rise in that area. And it's significant.
Yeah. Now, also Kickham Jenny. What's the status with Kickham Jenny? Because I know the fear has always been that, Kickham Jenny.
One of the most severe tsunamis that could be formed is when a volcano erupts. We know that Kickham Jenny is a possibility in the Caribbean, and that is probably our only major tsunami type activity that we'll have which will affect particularly our western shores and the eastern shores. But the problem about it is that the probability is low. We are more worried about the earthquake in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of our risks.
All right. Giles, we got to close down now, do we? All right, good. So, Doc, thank you very much. I know that time is out on us. Time has certainly flown on the show this morning. I want to thank you so much for coming here. You and I, let's discuss how we can partner with Win TV and what you're doing. I think it's too critical. What is happening in the United States is painting a picture for us that we can be in trouble. And of course, the talk about, you confirmed it today, there's this talk going around in Trinidad that Trinidad is actually splitting in two. But we're just simply lying on a fault line.
Yes, we have a fault line dividing the country.
But under continental drift, whereas they say under drift, are we actually splitting? Is Trinidad truly
No,
splitting?
it's not splitting. There are some seismic done by UV seismic that they're doing some tests now to see if that fault is actually active and if it's moving apart, or if it's dropping, or the science of it is exactly what type of fault it is.
Please let us know. Please let us know.
Sure.
Dr. Stephen Ramrupa, everybody, here on Win TV, Channel 12, and of course Channel 7. He's of course the Chief Executive Officer of the ODPM, and also to let you know, he's a medical practitioner. In addition to that, Doc's Ranch, the place where we all love to hang out. It's a place where we, especially for good country music and good eating.
Right.
We'll be right back after this. Please stay with us here on Win TV, Channel 12 and Channel 7. Right, welcome back. And around me are trophies upon trophies, 4 beautiful kids, and of course their handsome dad across here. And Kiran Singh to my right. Kiran Singh, of course, is the former president of the San Fernando Business Association. In addition to that, he, of course, is a major businessman in San Fernando and real estate development, etc., etc. And, of course, he is one of the lead instructors for the Silver Dragon Taekwondo Institute, and we'll be meeting these kids and finding out all about the great work that they've been doing. And Kiran, welcome, and thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you so much, Hansley. It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning to the viewers. Thanks for tuning in.
Good. Now, we're going to go to the interview in just a moment, and I just want to do this day in history. Giles, if we can, and I'll turn Giles, as soon as I bring up the image, I'll just turn to just read off my monitor behind me. And today in history, Muhammad Ali wins the Rumble in the Jungle. You remember that?
Yes.
The Rumble in the Jungle when he fought George Foreman back in 1974 in Zaire. On October 30th, 1974, Muhammad Ali becomes the heavyweight champion of the world when, for the second time, he knocks out 25-year-old champ George Foreman in the 8th round of the Rumble in the Jungle held in Zaire in Africa. And, they met for the first time. I think there's a typo here because it's not the second time he did. They met only once. Ali and Foreman only met once. 7 years before, Ali had lost his title when the government accused him of draft dodging and the Boxing Commission took away his license. The Rumble in the Jungle was Africa's first heavyweight championship match and one of the greatest of all time. It was named by promoter Don King, who had first tagged the bout from the slave ship to the championship. But this was met with disapproval by the president, the then president. The event was hosted by the government of West Africa in hopes that it would highlight Africa's beauty and vast reserves of natural resources to the world. Ali agreed with these sentiments, saying further that he participated because he wanted to merge the gap between American blacks and Africans. And that's where the famous saying came, Ali Boombaye. You remember that? Ali kill him.
Yes.
George Foreman, incidentally, came off the plane, and remember the people had gone through a lot of trauma with the Dutch at that time. The Belgians. And George Foreman came off the plane with a German Shepherd. And German Shepherds were used against the black Africans by the Afrikaners, as they say. And it certainly painted a very bad image of George Foreman. And, of course, he was the hero then. Ali Boombaye, of course, was the buzzword. Ali kill him. Another important day, by the way, in this Henry Winkler, the Fonz. Fonzie was born on this day back in 1945. On this day, the Fonz, classically trained actor, remembered as the leather-clad ladies' man from the long-running sitcom Happy Days, is born. He was best known for his role as Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli in the sitcom, which ran from 1974 to 1984. And, of course, his performance in Happy Days made his many fans believe he was the epitome of cool, especially since he portrayed a motorcycle-riding auto mechanic. Do we have the image of Henry Winkler, the Fonz? After the show went off the air, Winkler guest starred in a long list of TV shows, including The Practice and Arrested Development. On big screen, he appeared in films such as The Lords of Flatbush, Heroes, Night Shift, and The Water Boy. Henry Winkler, the Fonz. And closer to home now, in Trinidad, the Jose Massacre. Well, we still got Fonzie up. That's Fonzie. He used to go, hey. Yeah. Right, and the Jose Massacre in Trinidad in 1884. The Jose Massacre, also known as the Jose Riots or the Jahaji Massacre of 1884, took place on this day in San Fernando, our hometown, Trinidad, back in 1884. It happened when the British colonial authorities opened fire on participants who had been banned from entering the town during the annual Jose procession. Historians describe it as perhaps the bloodiest massacre in Trinidad and Tobago under British rule. 22 Indians were killed and 120 others injured in a hail of police gunfire at 2 Jose processions in San Fernando. Included in the casualties were defenseless women and children. Many historians who have studied the event reveal that Hindus as well as Africans were part of the Indian and Muslim-based street processions. Historians also believe that never before had such a large armed military force assembled in colonial Trinidad or in any other West Indian colony at any cultural event. Jose, remembered on this day, October 30th, 1884. Right, welcome back. And of course, these kids here, and well, we're long overdue for this interview. And folks, people aren't aware of the extraordinary work, and I'll ask Kieran if you could just rest that on the desk for me, of the extraordinary work being done in Trinidad, and particularly by this little group. And Kieran is going to tell me, and we'll see all these 4 lovely children sitting to my left here. Kieran, first of all, tell me about the Silver Dragon Taekwondo and the work that you've been doing. I understand you've been winning trophies in international competitions, and people are not aware of that.
That's right, Hansley. In fact, in July of this year, we went to Orlando, Disney World. There was an international U.S. Open tournament of martial arts. Our school, the Silver Dragon Taekwondo Institute of Discipline, took part, and we won several trophies. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, and as well as medals. We placed several of our students placed quite highly.
Yeah.
In the competition, and it's the first time we entered this competition, and we had countries from all over the world participated in this.
Is this the belt? What's this belt for?
This is another competition that we entered.
Okay.
As you can see, the Pan-Caribbean tournament in martial arts, and in 2010.
I'll zero in on it in just a bit. But you were telling me about the other competition?
Yes, the U.S. Open ISK World Championship Martial Arts Tournament. We had 12 students taking part, and we won 20 medals and 12 trophies. We placed first in more than one event, in 2 events actually, and we placed in the top 10 in the rest of the events.
Wow.
Every student who entered won a
These
medal.
are what, countries from all over the world?
All over the world.
And who participated? These little
These
angels here?
guys here. These guys, yeah.
Well, let's meet some of these little angels, and I'll ask them their names right now. And what's your name, darling?
My name is Karishma Singh.
Karishma Singh. All right. And what's your name, son?
Reese.
Tifa Reese. And your name, little baby? What's your name, darling? Don't cry, baby. What's your name? Tell Uncle Hansley. What's your name, darling?
Karina.
Karina. You're Karina? All right. You're shy. And you are, son? I'm Rashiva. Now, these kids won trophies. These, what are the ranges of their ages?
He's 9, 8, 13, sorry.
So you're 13,
He's-
8 years old. 8. And how old are you, baby? You're 4? 4 years old. And they participated in the event?
Yes, they did. They did.
And topped the world?
Yep, I have the results right here. We have the trophies to prove it.
Now,
2012.
I find it very fascinating, you know, that these kids who have done so exceptionally well in the world, that we aren't aware that they're doing this kind of thing. How do you see this, Kiran, contributing to youth development? Clearly, these are disciplined children. There's a certain level of discipline that comes to it. But how can we use activities like this for the development of youth, and particularly to tackle youth delinquency?
What we have found in our experience at the Institute, Hansel, is that kids who come into the school to start off all with basic training, they want to learn to fight, they want to get physically fit. But our institute is much more than about physical development. We look to harmonize the body, the mind, and the spirit into one holistic being, where the person is not going out there to fight, but is going out there to be a successful young adult, to become successful in business, academics. In fact, all our students have excelled in academics once they started our program. And it's quite amazing to see these young people start off at such a tender, shy stage. And when they get out, now they speak in public, they're very assertive. People who would bully them in their schools, they back off now. They've become very self-confident, very expressive in their views. And we even have a couple of students who were troubled, and their parents brought them to the school and were practically crying to us, Hansley.
Yeah.
What to do with these kids? They gave up. They left the kids with us and said, we don't want them anymore.
Really? And they put them in your hands?
And we have instructed them. Yes, they were very, very bad.
Bullying in schools is a major, major problem.
Yes, it is.
And recently, in fact, just the other day, 2 schools in South Kiran, one from Asja and the other from Pleasantville, there were stabbings across there.
Yes.
So violence in the schools is quite evident. Bullying in schools, of course, there were kids, which became a major national issue that the Ministry of Education had to deal with.
Yes.
And sporting disciplines like this will not only teach a child how to defend himself, but also can even make the bully understand discipline, and that you don't use your size and, of course, your strength for such a negative activity.
That's right, Hansley. You're very right.
Any of you kids have ever been bullied in school?
I've been bullied a lot.
Let me hear. All right, let me hear your story. Go ahead, tell me. You've been bullied a lot?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, darling.
When I was in first year, it had this girl that used to be bad to everyone. It continued until standard 3, but now in standard 3, she in the next class and
She used to rough you up.
Mhm.
Rough you? What would she tell you?
Well, she used to borrow my colors, and when she would steal them and take them with her.
And when you went to her, what happened?
She'd say, I don't know what you're talking about. When I ask her,
She used to physically push you around and that kind of thing?
yeah.
Hit
One
you?
time she threw me down and I had a bruise on my leg, on my foot.
How did becoming, well, you're a what, a white belt? Is that a white belt? All right. You're a white belt. How did learning taekwondo and learning the martial arts help you?
Well, when I learned martial arts, it teach me to stand. Well, I stood up for myself, and now in sanitary, I barely even see her.
Yeah. But would you bully anyone now that you know how to fight?
No.
Why?
Well, it's not the right thing to do.
And you learned that, didn't you? Son, what about you? You were bullied, were you?
Yes. In standard 2, but I transferred to TML, so an old school. Right, in standard 2, a boy named Abraham.
All right. Don't call his name. Don't call his name.
Right?
Yes.
I was walking to the cafeteria, right? Take out the money and go in the line to buy it. He took my money and ran away, right? And when I find him back, I took it back, then he bite my finger.
What did you do when he bit your finger?
I went and tell the principal what he did.
Have you been ever bullied since? And what do you think about bullying fellas who push them around?
That is very bad and that is very bossy.
Do you think they're cowards?
Yes.
What about you learning martial arts? Did it help you to understand bullies and how to defend yourself?
Yes. Yeah.
Can anybody bully you now? You're a green belt, so you're getting a darker belt. That means that you're pretty advanced.
Yes, I am.
What would you use everything that you learned? And let me ask both of you this. What would you use for everything that you learned for the good?
Well, I think I should stand up for myself and stand up for children who's afraid, and I should use it for the right thing to do.
Right. Does it help you with your work? Do you think it helps you with your schoolwork as well?
Yes, I do. And it helps you with your physical education too.
What about you, son? You're 13 years old. Yeah. And tell me about your story.
But they can't come to me because I would stand up for myself and they would just get in trouble.
Because you're a purple belt. How long have you been learning this?
Let's say around 6 years.
6 years? So you started this when you were 7?
Yeah.
All right. And what lessons did this teach you?
Well, it has taught me a lot of discipline. How to control yourself. Yes, not always fight. It's to think about your actions too.
Yeah. Do you think that there's too much of that fighting going on in schools?
There's really too much violence going on in schools nowadays.
Tell me about it. What school do you attend, son?
Naparima College.
Oh, you're in NAPS. Well, there isn't too much of a problem in NAPS when it comes to bullying, or is there?
There's some bullying, so a little bit of violence.
Right.
But not much.
But you see that. You saw it in
Yes.
primary school, and of course you see a little bit of it in Naparima College.
Yeah.
What do you think can help to change that?
The kids should learn to become more disciplined. They should like, instead of bullying, they should find some other way to put out their energy.
Yeah. Like what? Give me some examples.
They should probably have an extracurricular activity.
Right.
They should probably focus more on the schoolwork because bullies tend to be the not so bright ones.
Okay. So that's his insecurity. He's
Yeah.
insecure, and he tries to take it out on other people. So the government is introducing little things. You all know that the government is introducing through the Ministry of Education, and your Prime Minister and your Minister of Education are introducing something in schools where they now can assess you as part of your marks. You know about it, love. I see you nodding your head. How to engage in sport and dance and little creative writing, but more so drama and that sort of thing. Is
Drama.
that you're doing drama? Are you?
Drama. SEA going to be based on PE and drama.
Do you think that's a good idea on the part of the government? Why do you think it's a good idea?
Well, in drama, you learn how to do actions and teamwork.
Right.
Linear left and right, up and down.
Go ahead. What's that, son?
Linear left and right and up and down.
For infants.
Yes.
And it helps you with the coordination, of course. You all are all very bright kids. Are we almost up to 8? Yeah, we actually up to 8. Oh gosh. All right. Well, listen. And we didn't even get to bring Bruce on, so we got to do a part 2 on this.
Yes.
We're going to do a part 2 during the course of the week. I'm going to ask you to close. I'm going to ask you to close. Oh, no, we got time? What's our time now? We got to take a break then. I'm not actually following the time. Sorry about that. So, no, we don't do a part 2. We still got some time, Kieran. But I want to come back and talk about how this can be incorporated in the schools, how this can be incorporated to more schools throughout the entire country, how this can participate, because we have a problem. It's recognized. We even heard a testimony here. We'll take a break and come back. Stay with us. Giles, of all the songs you're going to find is who you're going to call Ghostbusters. All right. Okay. Thanks, Giles. Nice one. Nice one. Anyway, let me welcome Leroy Bruce, of course, who is the head of the organization. I haven't seen you since I shot my last movie.
Yes, that was a long time. That was a long time ago. As a matter of fact, when you came to my place, you were very young. That the hair didn't even go in your hair.
Yeah,
in your head at
I
that
still
time.
had some hair.
Oh, yes,
when I was shooting that movie.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, I still had some. I was made an honorary sensei, right?
Yes, that's right.
And we were
That's
part
right.
of a school store.
Yes,
Yeah, that was such a long time ago,
It
and I
was.
was over 200 pounds back then.
You look well. You look well now.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to what you're doing here.
Thank you.
Kieran, you wanted to add something very quickly with respect to the tent.
Yes. As a businessman, I'm part of an organization called TENT, Trinbago Emergency Network Team, an initiative by the Honorable Minister of Transport, Mr. Chandra Sharma. On this initiative, with all the disasters going on around the world, we just want to remind the citizens of Trinidad that TENT is here to help. We want people to join in to help our fellow citizens. What is going on in the U.S. is such a tragedy. China also has all these disasters going on. So please, let's get together and see how we can help our fellow human beings as we progress.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So,
Thanks,
TENT,
Angela.
how can you be contacted with TENT?
You can call Chan, of course, 678 Chan.
Yeah, well, that's easy to remember. CHAN.
You can't forget that. You can contact me, 678-8050.
What do you do? You deal with disaster management?
Yes, we assist the citizens. We liaise with the ODPM.
Right.
I know you, Dr. Ramut was on earlier.
Yeah.
So we're in close contact with the first responders and everybody. Of course, we cannot respond to an emergency, but we can certainly educate the public as to how they should deal with impending flood or hurricane or earthquake or things like that.
You're based in South?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a South-based organization. All right, good. And more so, well, we'll probably need you in about a month and a half when the world starts to come to an end. I know that's a talk now. Bruce, tell me about this really wonderful organization of yours.
Well, honestly, my organization is about molding minds, right, and creating leadership, right? And I believe in creating leadership from a very young age. We have been getting very good results from the time I started 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Where are you based? Where are you based, Bruce?
In San Fernando.
Right.
At Gulfview Link Road. Yes. And we have a lot of nice plan. Our vision is to bring down
youth delinquency.
Teachers, new teachers from abroad and so on to help with our society.
Okay, that's what you mean by bring down. You're flying them down here?
Flying down, yes,
Right,
yes.
right. Okay,
Right. I
good.
mean, and we want to, once I bring down, I really mean that we want to start this new organization, which is the Buddhist organization.
Right.
To teach that Buddhist philosophy and Confucius.
Also, there's a religious aspect to it.
Well, sort of, but I don't want to call it religious, because it's philosophy most of all.
Well, you know, Tina Turner, during her difficult times with Ike Turner, when she was being beaten and abused by Ike Turner, turned to Buddhism, of course, to find her way out.
Yes.
And I think she still practices Buddhism. Am I correct?
Yes.
She's still a Buddhist as well.
Yes.
And she learned to fight back as well.
Right.
But these kids around me here, these kids, now they're youngsters. They got involved in this for how long now?
Some of them about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We have a youngster here just about 3 months ago.
Well, Kieran was making a point to me, Bruce,
Yes.
Leroy, that some of them were leading a very dysfunctional life.
Correct.
And that they found a way out.
Yes.
With this. Any of them here who can tell me about that
Yes,
unhappy? You got a tough look, boy. Wow. Yeah.
Well, let's talk to this guy in the back.
All right.
First,
Yeah. Well,
you can
tell me
that
about your
story.
story, son. What was the situation for you?
Well, for a long period of time, I was rather miserable and in school. And then, like, my parents took me to Master Leroy Bruce, thought it would cope with my discipline problems and stuff. So I went to Master Leroy Bruce, and now teachers don't even have anything to say about me anymore. And thing.
What was causing your anger? What was causing you to be so angry with people around you? What was causing it?
Well, when I was young and thing, you know, there's always a few bullies and people that pick on you. So after a while, I was a short-tempered person and thing too. So.
How did this help you?
Well, I learned how to humble myself and thing by Master Leroy Bruce, because he also took me and made me a leader. Taught me how to teach people how to cope with other people and stuff. So
yeah,
that's why I have to thank Master Leroy Bruce for helping me.
Leroy, you have a picture here. Is that him in the cadets?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me hold it up.
Yeah, sure.
You could hold it up here, and Nigel could just. So that's you in the cadet force there.
Like Petrochin Cadet Corps. That's when we were on the San Fernando Hill for Petrochin, Petrochin Summit thing.
Do you think it's a good idea to make it compulsory for kids to get involved, for young men and women to get involved in the military service, or at least get the military training that you see in the cadet force?
Yes, because it also teaches you discipline and thing. Because young trend these days, everything is violence, and that teaches you how to be more humble and stuff. So.
What do you think is contributing to the violence among kids today? Let me go with you, son. What do you think is contributing to that?
I really don't have any particular idea, but it is mostly based on the internet and other homely stuff that they have been in.
Things happening home.
Yes.
Yeah. What are your own thoughts on it? What do you think?
Well, I think it's that kind of environment you try and grow up in, you know. If it's a violent environment, you know, that's you trying to be getting on.
Leroy, you wanted to add to that?
Yes. Aaron here, he started up about 6 months ago with me. And his attitude wasn't the best when I looked at him and I analyzed him.
Yeah.
And I took him and I made him like a role model in the school. I give him a title. I believe given title and given responsibility, and here like now the head in his penal branch, right? And he's taking up that leadership role.
Okay.
You know, and he's doing pretty good.
Giles, if I could just squeeze in 2 calls for anybody who can call in. I know the last one we couldn't take any calls. We got 2 minutes to wrap up, so we could squeeze in a call. 665-6278. That's 665-6278. Well, you don't look like a youth, but of course you're involved in the organization as well. You're a white belt, so which means that you just got involved.
Yeah, just got involved about 5 or 6 months now.
So I suppose there's hope for a fella like me then. I box. I've been boxing for a couple of years, but doing the taekwondo thing, I mean, the best I know, I would usually clown around with it and say, Chasu Kaifa, Chasu Kaifa, Toyota, Yamaha, that kind of thing. But, so how old are you?
43.
So it's never too late to learn this kind of thing. What are the benefits to a 43-year-old getting involved in this?
Well, when you get involved in it, your body also feel different because it's like an exercise too.
Yeah. And what sparked your interest in getting involved at 43 in taekwondo and martial arts?
Well, I was passing down Gulf City, and I saw the school there, and I decided to go and look for them.
And nobody was bullying you or anything like that, right?
No.
All right. Not even the wife. All right, okay, good. But, I think it's all important. We have any callers that we want to squeeze in? We just want to... 665-6278. That's 665-6278. Yeah, you wanted that?
Okay, Taekwondo school, as I say, it's one of the various schools out there to help the youths. Because each area in Trinidad and Tobago has a karate school. And they all help the kids. They all have the same vision. They have the same mind. Taekwondo, Silver Dragon wants to change that a little bit, where we want to set up a compound where people can come from wherever and just visit us, be with us. You're
renting a building right now?
No,
are you?
no, we're renting right now, but our vision is to build.
Build, okay.
And with that, we're going to be bringing in people from abroad, as Master said, and they will teach us, even people old, young, and they will teach us.
All right, I realize time is out on us. We can't squeeze any calls in now. But gentlemen, I think this is noble and very important. Youth delinquency, bullying in schools violence particularly, is just becoming too much. But as my friend here as well, it can help the adults in our society. Because if you notice, Leroy and gentlemen, the society is an angry society.
It is.
And it needs some tempering.
It is.
And I think that's absolutely critical. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you for your closing statements. You just got about 10 seconds to do so.
Okay. I would like to encourage people to focus on their discipline. Parents, discipline is very important for you to pass on to your child, to look and make sure that you analyze the situation properly and take charge of it.
All right, very quickly.
The youths out there, I will encourage you to find some kind of sport or some kind of curricular activity to get that energy that you have, that excess energy out, so that you don't take it on other people.
Kiran?
Yes, Hansley. We want to set up a national program where we go to the different schools to instruct the youth in discipline. We're not yet about learning to fight, but about discipline in your minds, growing you. And we want to partner with the Ministry of Youth, Sports, to get involved with us. And now is the time to engender this sort of strategy and philosophy in the minds of the youths before they go off course.
Yeah. And that is happening on a daily basis. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And what's the saying? Woos? How is it?
No.
No. Okay, I thought it was woos or something.
It's also us.
Oh, us. Okay, all right.
Yes,
Good. So, no, us.
Yes.
Thanks to Giles Wilson, our director, Nigel Paul, of course, working the floor as always, and Indira Dukaran for bringing out our bakery treats. Poor Indira, she had to drive down there to go pick it up, and we didn't show it this morning, but thanks to Bakery Treats, we got breakfast for them here. To Lawrence Arjun in the newsroom, to Faraz Ali on audio, and of course Val in the studio. By the way, tomorrow we'll be showing excerpts from that special clinic that was held by Chandray Sharma, our Member of Parliament for Faizabad, and of course our Minister of Transport. Will be showing some of that, and also some of the statistics from an optician with respect to eye disease in Trinidad. You'll be surprised to find out how high the figures are. I'm Hansley Ajoda. Thank you so much for being with us here on the show, and catch you tomorrow.